Hello, and welcome to this Soldo webinar. I'm Alanna Alexander, Senior Copywriter, and today I'm looking into a new trend in financial crime, AI receipt fraud. Ever since ChatGPT launched its image generator in March, employees have been using the AI tool to create fake receipts for travel and entertainment expenses that never happened. These receipts are hyper-realistic. They have the right VAT codes, the right addresses. They even have the right shadows and crinkles. Our own CMO, Isabel Duarte, brought attention to this thread on a LinkedIn post recently. Any business that still uses reimbursements and cash advances to manage employee expenses is exposed to financial leakage and compliance risk. The post received hundreds of comments, most of them with valid questions about how businesses should work to combat the problem. I'm posing some of those questions to our head of product marketing, Rory Choudhuri, today. Is AI receipt fraud really a threat to businesses? Let's find out. Hi, Rory. Thank you for joining us today.
Alanna, hi. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me along, and let's address some of these questions that arose in response to the discussion on LinkedIn.
Is AI receipt fraud a new problem, or is this something we've seen before?
AI receipt fraud is a new problem, but receipt fraud's absolutely been around forever. A small minority of people have long swindled money out of their businesses. Legend has it that the ancient Egyptians, when they were building the pyramids, some of the overseers would overstate how many people were in their work gangs in order to get additional beer and millet allowances. So, this isn't new. Look, before AI, employees would use whatever they had at their disposal. Would it be correction fluid, tape, Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, or Mac Draw, of course, if you'd made better OS choices. Every time one of those threats arose, businesses had to adapt to them.
So why is AI receipt fraud worth our attention?
Good point. It's different because everyone has access to it. And frankly, Alanna, the time, the skill, and the resources it takes to fake a receipt has collapsed almost to zero. It is ridiculously easy to do. And also, it's reasonably easy to do very, very well.
It seems like people can tell the difference, though, between a fake receipt and a real one. A lot of people on Isabel's post pointed out missing VAT codes or a wrong address. Even you pointed out that the prices didn't seem to match inflation.
Hey, look, my comment was much more in hope than reality. A central London restaurant offering 2 glasses of good red wine for 11 quid. Sign me up now. Look, seriously though, Isabel knocked that up in a few seconds. If you really want to get it right, you can fake the receipt to a level that would be very hard to tell. So put it this way, if you're the person responsible for checking the receipt, you're most likely going to be able to spot an AI fake receipt most of the time if you know you're looking for a fake. So just knowing that helps you to draw out the nuances that might otherwise slip it past. But most receipt checking staff aren't going to know that there's a fake receipt in the mix.
But isn't this what finance teams are responsible for, finding things that might seem a little bit off?
It's true, they are, but we know that finance teams are responsible for way more tasks than ever before. Listeners to our CFO Playbook podcast over the years know this and confirm this. Finance leaders, they're not just worried about cost cutting, they're thinking about growth. Increasingly, they're being charged with innovation. And parallel to that, we know that most finance teams are really pressed for time. A detailed review of every single expense receipt that passes over your desk is just not feasible.
So you're saying finance teams aren't just counting pennies, they're backing big ideas, opening new doors to new markets, helping businesses face economic downturns. And the data seems to show that these teams are getting smaller, aren't they?
It's true. And it's a good point to make because we've seen benchmarking data across Europe and globally as well. And it's showing that top performing finance organizations are operating both at much lower cost and, as you say, with far fewer staff. A recent report from Hackett says that world-class finance functions run at 47% lower cost. So that's almost half the cost. And they employ 50% fewer full-time employees than typical peers of similar size. That's a 4x difference. That makes a fundamental difference in an organization.
So, what can finance teams do to fight fraud right now without drowning in a swamp of admin?
Yeah, good point. Look, there are a few things that various finance teams do. One of the most obvious ones that we see, and particularly across Central Europe, is businesses using what are known as per diems. Per diems are daily allowances that organizations provide to employees to cover work-related expenses while they're traveling for business. Finance teams use them because the employee just receives a fixed daily allowance, so they don't have to track every single meal, every taxi ride, or every coffee receipt. But because there's no tracking, per diems are not a precise accounting of the actual spending. They're a flat rate estimate of what a reasonable day of travel should cost in a given location.
So businesses are saying we're willing to spend X amount per day per person. We don't really care about the breakdown. Why is that not good enough?
Because what businesses are saving in time, they're losing in insight. So at a macro level, businesses can't predict how employees are really spending money on the road, whether it's meals, transport, or other categories of spend. And for some businesses, as I say, that's a trade-off they're willing to accept. But in the long run, the lack of visibility limits their ability to control costs. It limits their ability to negotiate better deals in particular. So, any decent-sized company will try to have deals in place with airlines or with hotel chains in order to get preferential rates and pricing. And also, it doesn't really ensure fairness across teams. So without that detail that you need from a genuine accounting of expenses, travel spend just becomes a fixed cost of doing business instead of something that teams can learn from and therefore optimize.
So per diems don't give businesses enough insight into where their money is going. What about company credit cards?
Credit cards can give finance teams the control they need, that's for sure, but they're often inflexible. Imagine needing a little bit more credit just to meet the cost of an emergency flight or a hotel, or to fix something on a customer site if you need to buy some spare parts. But you're at your credit limit, right? A credit adjustment is going to take days or sometimes weeks. Plus, while company cards capture spend detail, they leave finance teams with the same fundamental challenge, a mountain of receipts to reconcile and categorize. And that is the time-consuming part of this. And also, one other piece, when the company's paying the credit card bill, there's no incentive for the employee to complete expense reports on time, accurately, ensure they have all the receipts, etc.
So it becomes another manual admin task that they have to complete now, reconciling these expenses.
Exactly.
What about reimbursements? A lot of the comments mentioned reimbursements and not with any fondness. Why are reimbursements so controversial?
Because they flip the problem onto the employee and they depend on your employee's personal credit. And that's particularly an issue with more junior level employees who may not have or may not want to mix corporate and personal credit together. And they're the ones fronting the company expenses on their personal cards, which creates real stress if claims are delayed or rejected. Not even, junior employees. I had a recent example at my last company. I was sent to a conference in the US. So I had an expensive flight on my claim. I had 6 days hotel in Austin, Texas, and meals, etc. So the total claim was over £2,000. One of the items within the claim was a taxi receipt, which I auto-scanned using the OCR function of our expense claiming software. The expense was incurred on the 2nd of September, funnily enough, not far off where we are now, a couple of years ago. But the OCR mischaracterized it into a US date format, and it got entered into my expense receipt as the 9th of February. So the entire receipt, the entire expense claim, got rejected because one item was supposedly more than 6 months out of date, which fell foul of our expense policy. So, it was nuts. And that's just one example. I've heard so many others. It's also my credit, right? It's on my card. I'm paying it until I get the reimbursement. And the one piece that doesn't change from the finance side, the reimbursements are still just another reconciliation burden. You're still sifting through receipts, you're matching them to expense claims and chasing down errors. It's slow, it's manual, and it's demoralizing for everyone concerned.
Yeah, that sounds very stressful. I think for a lot of employees that have had to deal with something like that, that must feel like a big burden. So per diems, credit cards, and reimbursements all carry hidden costs in terms of lost insight, admin burden, employee frustration. What should businesses do instead?
So, don't get me wrong, Alanna, they're all approaches that work, but there is a better way, right? So the fraud threat particularly highlights the weakness in all these three approaches. Businesses don't just need to stop fake receipts. They need a spend management system that gives them both control and visibility without adding to the workload.
So you're not asking businesses to buy a new tool just because there's a new trend with AI. What can a spend management tool do for them?
Well, let's look at what a finance team needs. And fundamentally, a finance team needs digital traceability, right? There's a need to they need to find a way to tie every transaction to a verified timestamp data trail. And it's interesting to see what's happening globally. The Italian government's taken a worldwide lead on this. And what they've done is they've mandated that every business within the entire country has to adopt digital traceability. So from the point of spend to the point of accounting through reimbursement or whatever process there is in the middle, you have to be able to track that transaction all the way. That regulation came from the need to eliminate tax fraud, but it works across the board, and it certainly helps to eliminate receipt fraud as well. So businesses could use the same mechanics with a spend management platform. Every pound or euro that's spent flows through a single system. And within that system, finance leaders can see transactions as they happen in real time if they need. Transactions are categorized automatically, so users aren't manually sorting them into whatever category of spend they've incurred. They just know where the money's going. And once you know where the money's going, you can stop the fraud before it happens. So the goal isn't simply to block fake receipts. And let's not overstate it. Fake receipts, yes, some people are going to do it. It's not a massive earth-shaking problem. It highlights a challenge with the entire expense process. So it's not about just blocking them, it's to design a process where fake receipts can't slip through in the first place. That way, finance teams focus on strategy and growth, and they're not doing detective work.
So you're saying a good spend management process doesn't just safeguard against AI fraud. It's about future-proofing against whatever comes next.
Exactly. Yeah. Fraud trends will evolve, but the need for control, insight, and efficiency, that stays constant. A resilient spend management system prepares you for today's risks and tomorrow's surprises.
That's a strong takeaway. Finance teams need tools that keep them safe, smart, and scalable. To everyone listening, whether you're skeptical about AI-powered receipt fraud or you think this is the next big threat, we want to hear from you. Leave us a comment on LinkedIn and tell us what you think. Thank you, Rory, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Alanna. Great to talk.